Hello ESL fan, and welcome to your weekly update on the elite Italian clubs. Agnelli steals the Gagliardini Challenge with the biggest swing and a miss in decades, while Milan and Inter furiously pedal backwards. But in serious news, the race for the Champions League is heating up, and the relegation fight's just ignited. It's drama all round in this episode of Scudetto. Hello and welcome to Scudetto, your weekly update on top-flight Italian football. So as we approach the critical phase of this season, the races for the Champions League places and the relegation fight really hotting up, so plenty to talk about there. We should probably also mention the small matter of the failed insurrection against football, which was launched with, I guess it's fair to say, plenty of Italian involvement this week. And we'll give you the Scudetto hot take on all of that. But first off, Kenny, other than sort of refreshing Twitter and furiously typing out hot takes about the European Super League, what have you been up to in the past 7 days since we last recorded?
I've actually spent most of my time in my house, Oscar. This is unusual for me. Normally I've got great stories to tell. But I've had a bit of a cold and a bit of a cough, so apologies if I sound a little bit like a chain-smoking old goat. But on the mend now, and very, very excited about getting a haircut next week. So it's all happening here.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the video feeds, which obviously the listeners won't be able to see, we are in need of some haircuts on this podcast. It's definitely fair to say. Any sign of a haircut in sight for you, Boaz?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Oscar, but I need to make a flash announcement that me and 11 of my friends are starting a brand new podcast starting tomorrow. And this is going to be without you guys. And any money I make is going to go straight to me. So see you later.
Buzz, I just want to ask you to reconsider. I've actually just done a quick poll of our fans, and they're all really against this, and I'm against it. And me and Kenny are both against it. We're going to kick you out if you continue with this action. So,
well, in that case, I'm back. How's it going, guys?
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to Kenny and talk to him about his beer, and then we'll consider whether we're going to let you back in, what kind of point deduction is appropriate.
I knew I overplayed my cards.
Kenny, what sort of beer have you got this week?
I have got a Tempest Brewing Company. I'm not going to respond to all of that nonsense that just went on there, by the way. I've got a Tempest Brewing Company Pale Armadillo Session IPA. I had one of these about 7 or 8 months ago, and it was quite nice. So I have another one, and it is still very pleasant.
What do you think we should do about Boaz? I mean, should we still ask him for a story? Maybe he doesn't get a story this week. That would maybe be an appropriate punishment.
I was going to say I will relinquish my story after that bit of bravado.
Okay, well, we'll still let you have a civilized beer.
I'm drinking a Brewdog Oat Cream DDH IPA, one of these ones that was named with a thesaurus, and it's very nice. Quite nice. Good stuff.
My story for this week is I've resumed training with my football team here in Helsinki. Hopefully, we're starting our league. It's a 7-a-side league, and hopefully we'll be kicking off our first game at the end of May. So we've been having some socially distanced training. It's a team which is made up of majority Italians, quite appropriately for this podcast, and the name of the team is Cazzone. So
without the L?
It's Cazzone.
Okay, sounds like it's without an L. Interesting.
So not a pizza.
It's not a pizza, no. The team logo is an aubergine.
I thought you were going to say something else. I'm glad you went with that. Fantastic.
Okay.
It sounds similar to like the Finnish verb for to see. So the Italians obviously find that hilarious.
I'm sure all the Italians are walking around me. Tell me, say to see, say it now.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I don't have a special beer to tell you about. I've got, again, the Tanker Sauna Session Birch Ale, which was the only thing I could get on short notice from the supermarket. So apologies. I'll try and come up with something more exciting for next week. Okay, so let's talk about the Super League first and just kind of get that out of the way, because football media in Europe, at least, has been talking of little else for the last week. I think it's fair to say that the reaction in Italy has been the same as it's been across Europe. One of the Italian newspapers led with Super League Super No which I think sort of sums up the reaction from fans and media. Just to get into the Italian angle on it a little bit more, but I guess the question we should be asking is, how have the elite clubs been chosen in Italy? Because, I mean, fair enough, Juventus and the two Milan clubs are three of the top four at the moment, but I don't think they've really been the most successful Italian clubs over the past 5-10 years.
Well, we're talking about the Milan clubs there, aren't we? Because obviously Juve have won 9 titles in a row, but...
Yeah. I mean, Juventus, fair enough, but the two Milan clubs at the top table.
Clearly, as in other countries, the clubs were picked on the basis of their reputation rather than any merit on the football pitch. And while the likes of, in Italy specifically, the likes of Napoli, Roma, possibly even Lazio might feel hard done by for not being included, for me, the glaring omission, and this is me and Kenny kind of swapping sides for a second, but the glaring omission here is definitely Atalanta, who are the exact reason why such a competition should not exist, because they're both financially sustainable, they're managed to pay their own stadium, they play what we all consider fantastic football, and their owner is not someone who was born yesterday. He has stakes in Starbucks, Uniqlo, Zara, I believe. So the notion that Atalanta is being considered this provinciale just on the basis of their history and not being considered for their current achievements and what they're doing on the field, but also crucially off the field, shows how poorly this whole competition was fought out.
Yeah, I actually would say also Napoli are a glaring omission, given that they were the main contenders to Juve up until last season, really. If we remember, when Ancelotti was taking Napoli into last season, the question was, can they pip Juve to the title? Because that had been their aspiration for the preceding years. I would also say that it's probably not based on reputation so much as turnover. Really, when you look at these clubs, sorry to veer away from Italian football for a little bit, but look at Arsenal, for example. Arsenal, this is going to be the 5th season in a row that Arsenal aren't even going to qualify for the Champions League unless they do it through the Europa League, which they nearly did a couple of seasons ago. And I think what this is it's a bunch of clubs who are basically not willing to face up to the reality of the financial crisis that is approaching us. I think if we're honest about this, it's clubs that are spending unsustainably, and you have someone like Florentino Perez going on television, and in one breath he's saying, "Oh, we've got this big financial crisis. We need to find a way to save football," and trying to paint this elitist competition as the savior of football. And then in the other breath, he's talking about, signing Haaland and signing Mbappe. And you've got to, that's not something that you can do. You have to face up to the fact that if you want to buy these players, you have to have the cash available to pay for what these clubs are willing to sell their players for. And if you don't, then you just don't sign them. That's what you have to do. And Boaz mentioned Atalanta. They're an excellent example. They're a club that spend within their means. This week, they confirmed their turnover for the year to December 2020. Not their turnover, their profits were 51 million euros, I believe it was. Even in a year where stadiums have been shut for 9 months, even without the Champions League, Atalanta would have broken even. That's just incredible, really, when you think about it. No gate revenue, set aside the Champions League revenue, and they are a side that are, as Boaz said, just run well. All of these clubs need to take a look at that. Juventus, Inter, they need to take a look at that, and they need to see what it takes to live within your means, because this is going to be a big old financial crash. It's going to be worse than the global financial crash of 2009, etc., and they just have to face up to reality. They have to live within their means.
To offer a perspective of a Milan fan here, I think what's most disappointing about this is that Milan had won back a lot of goodwill over this season. There's, as we've mentioned, there's one of the youngest teams in Europe. The football on display has been fairly enjoyable, and Coach Pioli and Maldini and in the backroom staff are generally likable people. So this whole action is also a spectacular attempt at shooting yourself in the foot in also in terms of popularity and world appeal.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Just to go back on what you were saying there, Kenny, it kind of highlights what we were speaking about a bit off air, that these clubs will really benefit from financial fair play. Like, if they know that their rivals are not going to be allowed to spend like crazy, unsustainably on transfers, then surely the compulsion to do that and spend beyond your means is massively minimized. I want to just kind of round this section up by reading out a quote from Gozens, who was asked about the Super League, said, "People are dying in the world. Money is lacking for everyone, and these 12 clubs create their own league so they can have 100 or 150 million euros shoved up their asses." You have to ask yourself where the ethics lie in all of this.
I mean,
and he goes on to say that he would join any protest against this league. I think he's right.
I think we all agree that this Super League idea was spectacularly flawed and wrong on so many levels. And what for me was most surprising was how it was presented. Because if you have this big plan, I mean, it should be ironclad. How are clubs like dropping out like flies? And how is your logo? It seemed like it was drawn by a GCSE student. But I'd be wary of painting the likes of UEFA, FIFA, PSG, Bayern Munich as some sort of shining light here that will save football. Let's not forget that PSG are essentially another oil-rich state backing a club. Bayern have been dominating their league for years and have been buying the best players from other clubs. Just this week, Seferin, it was announced his salary comes up to 2.2 million. Now, I'm sure he's very good at his job and he deserves every penny of that money. But at the same time, don't come and speak to me about ethics and the roots of football and how everyone there's a global pandemic and people are starving when you're clearly making a big chunk of football.
Absolutely. I fully, totally am behind that. And to the point where I think that UEFA can learn from this, and I'm not sure they will, from the way that they've responded by saying, we welcome these clubs back in. It seems like, all is forgiven. But no, all shouldn't be forgiven. You keep on making these clubs richer. These clubs were big clubs before. Not all of them, not PSG. And as we've spoken before, even Barcelona didn't win their first European Cup or Champions League until I believe it was the 90s. But these clubs were big clubs before, but they did not dominate football in the way they do until the Champions League existed and made them richer and more powerful. And guess what happens when you make people richer and more powerful and they say, we want more money and we want more power, and you give them more power and more money, and you just keep on doing that. Eventually, they're going to get to a point where they're like, well, why do we need you? And that's exactly what's happened here. So UEFA are absolutely complicit in this. It's inevitable that this is what's going to happen. There are absolutely huge clubs with massive histories in Europe of winning European competitions that now don't get a look in. And it's not because the clubs themselves aren't big enough or couldn't become big enough global brands. It's because they might come from the wrong country. They might come from a country where the television pool isn't big enough. And what you get by limiting it and concentrating all of the power is you get a small handful of clubs who say, these other clubs that you're putting us in groups with aren't as good as us. Of course they're not, because you're taking all the money. Because every time you're taking more and more of the money.
It's so short-termist as well, because you think you have this league of, like, this was a point made on another podcast and has been made in media, but you take this league of 20 teams and in 5 years' time, someone's going to be bottom. And the top teams are going to say, why are we carrying these teams that, have lower viewership than we do, and it's not good competition, it's not good content. Like, where does it end? You need people to play against. I think we've probably said enough on this topic. Just going back to the Gozan statement that I just read out, maybe we should speak about the Atalanta game, because Atalanta have drawn 1-1 with Roma tonight in a game which they almost certainly should have won. And in which Gosens was actually sent off for a silly second yellow. Kenny, you watched this one.
I did.
It's sort of hurt Atalanta's crusade for second place in Serie A, hasn't it?
Well, of course, it's very much 2 points dropped. It's shades of Fiorentina, and as I mentioned, shades of the game against Fiorentina. And as I mentioned at the time of the Fiorentina game, shades of the Torino match. There's absolutely no way Atalanta should have lost this game. Just look back at the highlights on YouTube, as I actually managed to get time to do after watching the game and before we recorded. Atalanta were just absolutely all over Roma, and should have been 3 or 4-0 up really by halftime.
So you've got a nomination, haven't you, for the Gagliardini challenge?
Yeah, Muriel. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so probably the turning point. A lot of people will say the turning point was the sending off for Gozens in this game, but probably it was actually Muriel missing. What was an absolute sitter about 5 yards out all the time in the world. Probably should have gone with his left foot, but decided to go with his right and managed to skew it past the post. And then about 5 minutes later, Gozens, like you said correctly, got himself a silly second yellow card. The game turned, and then it was kind of all Roma from then. And it has to be said, a wonderful equaliser from Cristante, although Golini possibly should have done better, but completely 2 points thrown away. Yes, it does hurt Atalanta's challenge, but this is something that I've said repeatedly about Atalanta. They do drop points. They do throw away winning positions, and with any other club, you might turn around and say that's going to hurt them. That might change the sort of trajectory of their season. But they pick themselves up. They're very good at that, and I guess it's testament to Gasperini. They pick themselves up, they go out there, and they're just as likely to go on a 5-game winning run after this. I think Atalanta actually have a very good run-in. I think the only side from the top 6 that they've got left is Milan, so they've definitely still got a very, very good chance to finish second even, not just to qualify for the Champions League.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Buzz, the same can't really be said of Fonseca, can it? Because Roma have continued to be incredibly inconsistent. Obviously, getting a draw, which they arguably didn't deserve tonight against Atalanta. But when we previewed this game, we were talking about how much having the extra games in the Europa League might affect them. But what I guess we didn't predict is that they were going to drop points this weekend in their game against Torino, which they ended up losing 3-1. Just a kind of mad roller coaster of events in the Roma camp.
Yeah, and it looks like the league the Champions League qualification is out of reach at this point, and this game in particular showed everything that is so frustrating about Roma this season. They went 1-0 up with a pretty good goal that Borja Mayoral kind of smacked it into the bottom after receiving a ball just cutting the offside trap. And you think, okay, this game is kind of downhill for them. Torino are going to push forward because they're in a relegation fight, and Roma have the counter-attacking power to beat them. We've seen them do it earlier in the season. And indeed, Pedro had a great chance, and there was a few missed opportunities. And then, of course, as they say in Italy, gol sbagliato, gol subito. And Torino came back the other end, and essentially what it came down to is they wanted it more, let's face it. Torino have shown great character, and they basically outplayed Roma in every department. We've mentioned this in previous episodes, but Roma seem to be really lacking in the goalkeeping department. In our last episode, I heavily criticized Paul Lopez for his performance against Ajax, and how he didn't make life easy for the Romanisti. It has to be said in his defense that he did save a penalty in the first leg of that game, so at least there's that. And in this game, Mirante just came out to collect a cross and was in no man's land. And this is the kind of stuff that I think you're taught as a young boy, as a goalkeeper. And it's nuts that a club of such resources is lacking in such a crucial area of the pitch.
Yeah, I think a couple of those points that Boaz made were very, very relevant tonight as well. The one about desire, firstly. until Atalanta sending off, Roma were very obviously lacking in desire. There was a lot of wayward passing, but more evident than that was that anytime there was any forcing of the issue that needed to be done, it was the Atalanta players doing it, not the Roma players. And the other one is that you might look at the number of shots on target that Atalanta had and say, well, Paolo Lopez has had a great game, but that would be misleading because a lot of the saves that he made tonight were actually just shots that were just fired straight at him. I think there was a couple of good sort of reflex saves in there, but in general, it was very much a story of wastefulness. But that lack of desire that Boaz spoke about, that like not wanting it as much as the opposition, was very much, while tonight's game was 11 against 11, it was the same story. And I think that's a real problem for Roma. And I mean, Champions League, a point tonight does very little for Roma, and Champions League is looking beyond them.
Yeah, I mean, unless they can kind of do the impossible. Obviously, now got the Europa League semi-final against Man United, first leg this Thursday. I mean, you wouldn't, on current form, you wouldn't expect Roma to really be able to do anything in that game, but it's a cup tie, and
we all remember the score the last time Roma visited Old Trafford.
Just in case some of our listeners don't, Baz, what happened?
I believe it was 7-1 with a fantastic goal from Daniele De Rossi from about 35 meters out.
Okay, well, I'll definitely be looking forward to that. And while we're on kind of high-scoring games, maybe we should just do a quick mention of Napoli 5, Lazio 2, which is the result in the other game tonight. It's just finished. We've been recording. We haven't really had a chance to watch it, but I mean, that's just a crazy result, isn't it?
That was 2-0 when we went into pre-prod.
Yeah, Napoli were leading 4-0 at some point, and it looks like, as we mentioned last week, as soon as they have all their players available, they become a completely different proposition.
Yeah, and it kind of reinforces my view that I was espousing before we started recording, that Juventus are going to be the team to miss out on the top four this season, in my opinion, just looking at the run-in and the form that Napoli are in.
Yeah, it's looking... I mentioned earlier that Atalanta have got a pretty kind run-in from here, aside from the game against Milan. Juve, on the other hand, have got a very, very difficult run-in. They've got Milan and Inter to play. They've got Sassuolo to play, who were great the first half of the season, seemed to die away a little bit, but have now gone on a 3-game winning run. So... yeah, that's not going to be easy at all. And also Udinese, who have taken points off of just about every top 6 side. They've taken points off Atalanta, they've taken points off Inter, they've taken points off Milan. I think, in fact, Juve are probably the only side they haven't taken points off of. But yeah, it's just that is really, really fascinating, much as the title race is over and has been for a few weeks. This race is just getting more and more exciting. I mean, now you've got 4 sides. Lazio aren't out of it either if they win their game in hand, but you've now got 4 sides within 3 points of each other, all chasing 3 spots. It's really, really exciting, and Juve definitely are up against it here.
Yeah, and even if Roma do the impossible and win the Europa League, this makes no difference now to the spots that are awarded through the league. Boaz, what do you think? Who's your favourite to drop out?
This comes on to the Milan segment next, but I'm actually a little bit worried about De Rossoneri's chances of making qualification. On paper, they only need to make 9 points from the remaining 18, but the way the club is playing at the moment and the actual fear you see on the pitch in approaching games that should otherwise be easy doesn't bode well, and I'm honestly thinking that some changes need to be made immediately in terms of mentality. Zlatan, who it was just announced he signed a new contract for 1 year, so that's at least a little bit of good news, but he's been missing from the pitch, and he's actually missed over 50% of the games this season. So that shows that Milan are lacking in depth, and his replacements are probably not up to the standards, or at the very least they don't do what he does. Leao led the line against Sassuolo, and while I genuinely like the player and he gets a lot of stick on social media because he's not clinical enough, but I think he's a great winger. But he doesn't have the poacher's instinct, and time again, Milan have lacked that, including in these last 2 rounds where kind of struggled to get a victory against Genoa, only succeeding in getting it thanks to a very bizarre own goal with his back from allegedly Milan-bound Scamacca, so that could be considered his first ever goal for Milan. But really, a lot of hard work to get this result, and then the game against Sassuolo was also, it should have been done and dusted, but they let the Sassuolo back into it.
Yeah, and this kind of feeds, really, this sort of inconsistency really feeds into the last talking point, which is that Inter have actually been dropping a few points. Like the last 2 games, they've drawn 1-1, and it's an opportunity, because I know we've been saying that the title race has been over for a while, but I mean, it's 6 games left? If they'd won at the weekend, that would just be 7 points.
And this feeds into what I said earlier, that Milan are literally bottling it, because this is the 3rd or 4th occasion where they had a chance to put a little bit of pressure on Inter. I'm not saying that this pressure would have necessarily worked out, but you're playing a game before, you're playing at home, so in theory this should be 3 points in the bag. But instead, you lose the game, and Inter went on to draw, of course, but mentally Inter have to consider it a point gained.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'd like to give some. I'd like to mention Sassuolo's coach De Zerbi and his quotes before the game that kind of link into our earlier segment. And he said, "I have no pleasure in playing Milan. If it was up to me, we wouldn't go there. This was a coup d'état." I wonder if he feels the same way now that they got the 3 points. But to kind of go full circle, this is yet more proof that Milan are bottling it, because you have your rival coach and some of their players basically trash talking you in the media, and instead of using that as some sort of ammunition to fire yourself up, and I mean, this would have been perfect. The lowly Sassuolo are dissing the Super League Milan, but instead, I mean, lowly Sassuolo are a well-run club and they play some good football. They tricked you into losing, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it does feed into, I think, what we've been saying throughout, which is even if Inter, from here on in, are to drop points, it requires the other teams to win all of their games. And I think this isn't just something that applies now that Milan have dropped a few points. I think it's something that we were saying a few weeks ago. The reason that we were saying the league was over is that there are still difficult games coming up for other teams as well. So Inter can still drop points, and they can unexpectedly drop points as well, as they have done this week. I don't think anyone expected them to drop 4 points this week, perhaps a couple, but they can't unexpectedly drop them. But in order for any other side to win, now, I mean, let's not even consider the fact that it's a possibility, but even a few weeks ago, it would have required Milan or Juve to be absolutely perfect from here on out. And I think we all knew, given the form, that wasn't the case. So I understand Boaz's frustration as a Milan fan, but I think realistically it's been time to let the dream go, maybe for a while, because I don't think it was ever really going to happen that either of these clubs were going to have perfect run-ins.
Kenny just mentioned form there, and I think that's the key word in this title race. If you look at Milan's home form in comparison to other clubs, they have the 7th best result in the league, below Juve, Inter, Roma, Napoli, Atalanta, and Lazio, and that's simply not the stuff of champions. In contrast, at home they lead the table. They're above Inter by 4 points. It's a little bit weird to be discussing home and away form in a season where there are no fans, and yet you see that Juventus is away form. They're also 7th, below Sassuolo, below a lot of clubs. So this is where Juve and Milan have dropped the points. Milan at home and Juve away, essentially, because Inter are 2nd in both those tables.
Yeah, and that's a good segue, actually, the kind of informed teams, because looking ahead to this weekend, it looks like Torino versus Napoli could be the kind of most influential game. Both teams obviously on a pretty good run.
Do Lazio not play Milan as well?
Lazio do play Milan, which is definitely an important point in the race for the top 4. But I think with Torino still not safe after that crazy game between Cagliari and Parma, this game could have implications both in the relegation fight and in the top 4 race. But happy to talk about either game. Kenny, do you have strong feelings on Milan-Lazio?
I would say this is the bigger game. Personally, I think Torino are only about 3 points away from relegation. They do have a game in hand, but I've been saying before, Torino aren't safe yet, Torino keep on picking up points. And if I am a Benevento fan, I'm more worried right now than I am if I'm a Torino fan. I actually think now it's looking like that final relegation spot is between Benevento and Cagliari. To be honest, Lazio have a game in hand. They are on. I mean, they've had a horrible result tonight, but they've been on great form. And yeah, Boaz was saying he's worried about Milan letting this slip. It just kind of feeds into what we were saying before, doesn't it? It's really, really fascinating because you just cannot call it. You just cannot call which way that race is going to go. And I do think Lazio are slight outsiders just because they haven't got those points in the bank yet. But undoubtedly, that story completely changes if Lazio beat Milan. Like that is, as the cliche goes, an absolute 6-pointer.
And both clubs have had a mixed week with Lazio beating the aforementioned Benevento 5-3 in what was a real fun game. Then obviously losing 5-2 to Napoli just today. So it's kind of hit and miss for Lazio, and Milan drop points as well. So they'll both presumably come in fired up for this. And this is a game where Milan won the first leg 3-2 after dominating the first half and being dominated for much of the rest of the game. So kind of Lazio will be out for revenge as well. I think Kenny's right in saying that this is a fireworks game, and it's one of those games that will definitely weigh on this whole Champions League race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you've just mentioned the two clubs that have had mixed weeks, which brings us nicely onto our good week, bad week section for the clubs that have not had mixed weeks. Who are we nominating this week? I mean, we just very briefly touched on the Cagliari-Parma game where Parma let a lead slip to come back and lose 4-3.
In injury time. Yes.
In injury time.
No question at all. And then they followed that up by letting a lead slip again. Fair enough, it was against Juventus and they took the lead in the first half and it was only a 1-goal lead. But you can't look beyond Parma for a bad week. Like losing to relegation rivals when you're going into injury time, leading against them. Not even dropping 2 points, but dropping 3 points from that situation. And then to lose again in midweek. Stonewaller for me. Parma, bad week.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we've decided before that we can't give this to an individual because I think Agnelli would definitely have been in the running this week.
Well, can we give it to 3 clubs?
Yeah, we could give it to the elite.
12 clubs.
The Italian elite clubs.
No, it goes to Parma. Still goes to Parma.
With the Super League, Parma still had the worst week.
I think we just completely ignore anything that happens outside of the official leagues that we cover, so it goes to Parma. And what about good week? Who's had a good week? I mean, Napoli have just won 5-2. They're just a candidate probably based on that, but Sassuolo have also won 2 games.
Yeah, Napoli picked up a point against the Inter, stopped that run as well, so it's a tough one, isn't it? Napoli's definitely is more consequential because Sassuolo aren't going to qualify for the Champions League at this stage or even the UEFA Conference. But I do think, Sassuolo, that result against Milan, what a result. And when you take into account De Zerbi's comments before the match, I think a real victory for the small clubs in a week where they have been disrespected is a very light word for what happened to the smaller clubs. I'm going to go to Sassuolo for this. 2 victories and also one of them against elite Milan. So
yeah, happy with that, Buzz. Any?
I think we have to give it to Sassuolo also because highly rated Giacomo Raspadori came off the bench and scored 2 shots, I believe, both with his left and his right foot. So he's one of the great prospects in Italian football, and it was kind of, even though I'm a Milan fan, it was kind of a good way to kind of stick the finger up to this whole Europa League business.
Yeah, 9 years I believe he spent at Sassuolo coming through the youth academy. So lovely story.
Honourable.
All right, I'll take that one. And it's a good way to kick off the honourable mentions section. I want to start with giving one to Mario Mandzukic, who has donated his salary for the past 3 months where he's not been playing to charity, which I think fair play to him. He obviously doesn't feel like he's earned the money, and it's a nice gesture. But you have given a dishonourable mention before on this podcast to thieves. I noticed they've popped up again. Obviously, stealing is bad. Does it have some relevance to?
No, I'm just I have a very strong feeling against thieves in general, and I feel we should give dishonourable every episode to something that we feel is out of order. But seriously, Chris Smalling was robbed at the beginning of the weekend. Obviously, this news has kind of gone under the radar with all the other craziness that has gone down, but his family was at home while it was happening, and apparently it was a little bit violent, and they got away with a lot of stuff in his safe. So obviously dishonourable to thieves, but also wishing for all the best for the Smalling family, and hope the crooks get found.
Yeah, and next week, dishonourable for murderers on goals. But first, Kenny, your goals honourable. Who's impressed you this week?
I actually want to give a dishonourable to kidnappers, first of all. Yes, honourable mention. My goals honourables, I'm actually mixing it up a little bit this week, and I'm making it themed. And my goals honourables are half-volley themed. And I know you take exception to this, Oscar, but I've got 2 definite half-volleys, which are Rebic for his half-volley for Milan against Genoa, definitely a half-volley, and Mandragora for his half-volley for Torino against Bologna. 2 absolutely great goals. Mandragora's in particular was like a rocket, just the trajectory of that thing didn't seem like it was coming back to earth. It was like an arrow.
Yeah, I mean, we won't get into the kind of semantics of it, but for me, a half-volley is where you catch the ball on the ground simultaneously. Listeners can have their own opinion on that. The 2 great goals in any case. Boaz, you wanted to give Immobile an honourable this week.
Yeah, Ciro Immobile had gone 8 matches without a goal, which is a very long stretch, particularly for what a striker such as him. But this didn't stop him from lending the penalty to Correa when it came to take it. And Immobile was eventually scored 2, so had he taken the penalty himself, he could have been on a hat-trick. Generally, nice guy Ciro, and good on him for spreading the love.
And on a completely different note, Kenny, you've got an honourable for Goran Pandev.
Yeah, I think this is... I actually don't have the spreadsheet of whoever the official honourable and dishonourable sort of stats is on this. I am not that person, but I believe this is the 3rd time that Goran Pandev has got an honourable mention, and it's been quite some season for him, really, with North Macedonia qualifying for their first major finals. But this one is for him hitting 100 goals in Serie A. He did it just before his 100th birthday, and he is the first North Macedonian player to hit 100 goals in Europe's top 5 leagues, and also a nice opportunity for Antonio Conte to become the latest manager to weigh into the won't he retire debate, and to tell Pandev not to retire. So just a nice feel-good story all around.
I just wanted to give an honourable to Malinovsky, who has been involved in 8 goals, 3 goals and 5 assists in his last 5 games for Atalanta, including a goal today.
Yeah.
So fair play to him.
Boaz mentioned desire earlier, and that goal today was all about that. All about desire.
And of course, he also got the winner against Juventus, so he's having a fantastic season all around. I'm still angry with him for his fake Twitter account that conned us earlier in the year. but since he's playing so well, I'll let that go.
Yeah. I mean, his winner against Juventus was by way of a very heavy deflection.
He wanted it,
but nonetheless deserved.
Kenny, I see you've got an honourable here for Rummenigge. Obviously, we haven't talked enough about the Super League this week, so...
Well, yeah, this one probably we could have done without, given that I went on a rant about how clubs need to live within their means. But this is Rummenigge basically in response to the Super League saying what anyone who has seen the balance sheets of any of these clubs would say, which is you don't need a Super League, you just need to live within your means, basically. And for that to come from the top seeded side in the UEFA coefficients and multiple Champions League winners, Bayern Munich, I think, is much more powerful than coming from anyone else. So in a week where we saw the worst side of power, Boaz said, let's not let's not paint these people out to be, heroes. But that definitely was an important statement that needed to be made by someone in a high position, because people in lower positions have probably been saying this for ages and just get ignored. But coming from someone in such a powerful position at such a powerful club, I think it had to be said.
Yeah, fair enough to restate that in the honourables as well. I think it's an important point. Buzz, you've got an honourable down here for Joao Pedro.
Joao Pedro almost featured in 2 honourables this week because he had a fantastic goal disallowed by VAR. For a foul that occurred a few minutes before his goal was even scored, so one of these goals that only VAR would disallow. But the reason I'm giving him an honourable is because at the end of the riveting Parma Cagliari game, despite his side winning, Joao Pedro, who was also Cagliari's captain, it has to be said, instead of celebrating with his teammates, he went and sat next to Kurtic of Parma, who is his ex-teammate. They were both kind of tearful. Kurtic, obviously, because he's all but relegated, and Joao Pedro was a beautiful gesture, and it deserves a honourable from us. And this was first tweeted by our good pal Milan Obsession, so thanks for spotting that for us.
Absolutely. And in honour of Milan Obsession, I'll let you have one more mention in the from the Milan camp.
The most disappointing thing for me of these this last few games where Milan have struggled has actually been Coach Pioli's attire. He feels to me like he's just docked his super yacht and he's kind of strolling into town to find a cocktail, a martini or something. I mean, I don't know what the idea with a white shirt, a blue blazer, these crazy shoes. Like, come on, mate, just dress up to win. This is not. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of worse than Guardiola's infamous cardigan that he wore on the sidelines a year or two back.
It belongs in the America's Cup. He shouldn't be wearing that in Serie A, especially not in Milan, the mecca of fashion.
Well, while we're on the Americas, let me just give a quick honourable to Carl J. Kraus, obviously the new owner of Parma, new this season. For his tweet that he said he came to Italy because of his passion for the game, and he understands and appreciates the risks of the game by deciding what happens on the pitch, and he believes that that's what makes this game beautiful. So obviously he does know what relegation is, contrary to some speculations on this podcast earlier in the season. So sorry, Carl, and have an honourable mention. Right. And let's wrap it up with a dishonourable, Boaz. Who's earned your wrath this week?
For years, fans have been saying that Cristiano Ronaldo is not influential enough on free kicks. But this season, that seems to have changed. You may remember he was very much responsible for a free kick goal that Porto scored that essentially knocked Juve out of the Champions League. And this week against Parma, he was at it again. He was placed in the wall, and at this stage, I don't understand why they continue putting him there. He's a tall guy, but he didn't jump as opposed to all his teammates, and the ball went above his head and into the goal. And as Kenny was saying before we started recording, if you're an opposing manager, just tell your free kick taker, hit it as hard as you can at Cristiano. Worst thing is, you're going to hurt him. Or even better, you'll step out the way and you'll score.
Obviously worried about the face insurance money.
Much like Zlatan, he has plans for Hollywood after this, after his career. Not the face, not the face.
I'll look forward to not watching him in an Asterix movie in the near future. But I think that's all we've got time for this week. So thanks very much for listening. We look forward to speaking to you again next week. If you don't already, please do subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your audio. Until then, enjoy the football.
La partita che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. La Juventus è campione d'Italia. Questa data, il 6 maggio.
Anticipo, la Roma è campione d'Italia per la stagione 2000.